Halloween night. A chill hung in the air, biting and relentless as I paced around my apartment trying to make sense of the strange calls. For days, I had been receiving eerie messages and unsettling voicemails from people I barely knew. Each one accused me of things I hadn't done, claiming to have seen me in places I hadn't been. My friends were asking why I ignored them at the cafe or why I looked so angry in the grocery store. It was unsettling, like a bad dream that wouldn't end. Tonight, I decided I'd had enough. I couldn't sit around waiting for the next call or message. It was time to find out what was going on. I slipped on my jacket and headed out. The streets were alive with trick-or-treaters, their laughter echoing through the cold air, but it all felt wrong. The shadows seemed to twist and stretch, playing tricks on my mind as I made my way to the cafe. The last place someone claimed to have seen me inside, the air was thick with the scent of coffee and a strange sense of unease. I scanned the room, hoping to find a familiar face that could explain all this. Suddenly, a woman across the room caught my eye. She was staring right at me, my heart stopped. She looked exactly like me. Same hair, same clothes, even the same tiny scar on her cheek from when I fell as a child. For a moment, I felt frozen in time, trapped in some horrific mirror. She smirked, her lips curling up in a twisted smile, as if she knew every single thought running through my mind. The air felt thick, suffocating. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. Her gaze was a trap holding me in place, forcing me to face the terror that was standing only a few feet away. Then, without a word, she stood up and walked towards the door, vanishing into the night. My legs finally remembered how to move, and I bolted after her, out into the cold. I called out, but she was gone. The streets were empty, the sounds of Halloween drowned out by the pounding in my chest. I stumbled back home, locking every door and window, the reality of what I'd just seen refusing to sink in. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up, pacing the floor, every sound a potential threat, every shadow a reminder of what I'd seen. But just when I thought I was safe, the phone rang. I picked it up, half expecting silence. Instead, I heard my own voice whisper, "I'm coming for you." The line went dead. The room spun around me, a sickening wave of dread washing over me. She was out there, somewhere in the darkness, waiting. And I knew somehow she wasn't just a reflection. She was me, or worse, she was becoming me. For days, I tried to shake off the horror of that night, but the memory of her, of me, kept clawing back into my mind. The phone calls continued, each one worse than the last. Every time I picked up, it was my own voice taunting me, whispering dark things about what she'd do once she took over. I barely slept, my mind racing with fear and confusion. I felt like I was losing myself, bit by bit, to a shadow I couldn't escape. But I wasn't ready to give up. I started digging into legends and myths about doppelgangers. If she was real, then there had to be a way to stop her. Late one night, after scrolling through countless websites, I found an old story about how these doubles could be defeated, not by running, but by confronting them. If I could face her and show no fear, she would be forced to reveal her true form and disappear forever. It sounded absurd, but what choice did I have? Halloween was almost over, and I had one night left to take back my life. I made my way to the old park where I'd seen her last. It was past midnight and the place was silent. Shadows danced among the trees, and the only sound was the rustling of leaves beneath my feet. I took a deep breath and called out into the night, "Show yourself." For a moment, there was only silence. But then she stepped out from behind a tree, looking every bit like me, but somehow darker, twisted. She wore that same smirk, her eyes glinting with a malicious gleam. She took a step closer, but this time, I held my ground. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She just laughed, a cold, empty sound that made my skin crawl. "You're weak," she replied, her voice a distorted version of my own. "Your life belongs to me now. I'm just taking what you were too afraid to claim." "No," I said firmly, taking a step forward. "This is my life. You don't belong here." The wind picked up, swirling around us, and I could feel her presence weakening, her form flickering in and out of view. She snarled, reaching out to grab me, but I didn't flinch. I stared her down, my heart pounding, refusing to look away. Her face twisted, her body flickering like static on a broken TV. With a final scream, she shattered into a cloud of smoke, dissolving into the night. The wind died down and a calm settled over the park. I stood there, breathing heavily, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over me. She was gone. As I walked back home, I felt lighter, free in a way I hadn't felt in years. The shadows no longer seemed as dark, and for the first time, I was grateful for the warmth of the early morning light. I knew I'd faced my fears and won. Whatever that thing had been, it no longer had any power over me. I'd taken back control. By the time I reached my front door, the sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm glow over the street. I looked up at the sky, a smile creeping onto my face. Halloween was over, and so was the nightmare. I was finally free.